Now, just to kind of get started, I wanted to say my name is Catherine Coble. I'm a partner here at Shoff. We're a public relations and advertising agency. And so storytelling and engagement and really understanding and connecting with people is critical to us. And so today's topic is going to really give us an opportunity to talk about that from a really interesting perspective on the convergence of social impact in our communities and employee engagement at our employers. So just to kind of get started, I'd like to introduce our guests today. First, we have Josh Driver. Josh is the CEO of Selflessly, which he co-founded in 2017. And it's basically a company that offers a software product to help businesses navigate their community service commitments. And Josh, we want to hear a little bit more about that here in a moment. But Josh is no stranger to philanthropy and advocacy. He actually launched Open for Service in 2015, which was a nonprofit sticker campaign that was meant to counter the Indiana legislature's passage of the controversial Religious Freedom Restoration Act. He also has raised over $40,000 for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society's Man of the Year campaign. So that is an amazing feat. Josh, thanks for doing that. And he's currently a member of several boards, committees, and some advisory groups for organizations such as Leadership Indianapolis, working with the City of Indianapolis, Indiana Youth Group, and ND Pride. So Josh, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Our second guest today is Jacqueline Erickson Russell, and she is the founder and CEO of Social Impact Advising Group, which is really an organization that is focused on providing custom designed solutions and consulting services that can help businesses and nonprofits and other organizations to really align their purpose, their community investments, stakeholders, and their strategy. And so Jacqueline is going to give us all sorts of great insights from a number of those different perspectives as she's worked with clients in different areas. Previously to the role she's in now, Jacqueline led strategy at the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation, which has over $2.6 billion in assets and $36 million of annual giving from the education department. So lots of great work that's going on there. She currently leads a national participatory grant-making coalition, and she volunteers her time as the board chair for Single Mom KC. She's a mentor for Big Brothers Big Sisters, and she works within her church. So she is also no stranger to community service and advocacy in the community that she calls home. So Jacqueline, thanks for joining us today as well.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. So just to get started, I wanted to set up the topic a little bit. A while back, I had the opportunity to meet Zach Rodenbarger with Selflessly, and we had a really great conversation about Selflessly's software product, how various companies were using it, and it led to this larger conversation about the trend in employee engagement through the use of social impact. Now, this conversation actually started before COVID, and it's been really interesting to see how COVID has in some ways changed that, but also opened up some new opportunities as well. And so I think it will be interesting to kind of pull that back into our mind and think about that. Here we are post-pandemic, dare I say that, and the topic of social impact really is just burning even hotter now. So we want to talk a little bit about that. And I'd like to start with Josh. Tell us a little bit more, first of all, about Selflessly and what it offers to our customers or to your customers. And then we can dive more specifically into social impact.
Sure. Yeah. My background has been building nonprofit tech for a long time and running those companies and always looking at what the next line of revenue and resources is going to be for nonprofits. And when I started looking at the market, there are a lot of companies that want to give back. They have the resources, whether it's through volunteering, through donations, through grants. But a lot of the information out there is about the Intels, the Microsofts, the big companies. And so we wanted to build a software that allows enterprise benefits that can be provided to employees and make that affordable for companies of all sizes. So our system gives all the functionality to create a workplace giving program, volunteer time off, ERG management, and grants and in-kind donations. And so then all that data can be used to create a social impact report that employees can see and consumers can also take a look at.
That's great. That's really helpful. Jacqueline, it might also be helpful if you give us just a little bit more background on the work that you're doing within Social Impact Advising Group, particularly some of the things maybe you've been involved in more recently.
Absolutely. I used to think I had the coolest job, and now I think I have the coolest job. So I don't know if I just keep getting more lucky or what. But yeah, some recent projects I'm helping a community foundation with a needs assessment around how they support 50 local family foundations and guiding best practices for those family foundations. I designed and I'm operating an accelerator for businesses who have social change goals. And then I coach nonprofit leaders. I have a few that are in the midst of launching new projects. So it really ranges from actually operating on behalf of organizations, helping organizations decide the strategy to move forward, and then more high level strategy and coaching that empowers the leader. But either way, whether it's a business who's thinking about the social change goals that they have, or a family foundation on how to give strategically to the community, my goal is to work with leaders to empower them to create more social change. And then it's individualized for each organization, which is the fun part.
I love that you are you have a foot in both doors in terms of industry, businesses, for-profit companies that want to make an impact, but also you have your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the actual nonprofit world and making those connections, not just making connections between organizations, but also making connections between what really would have an impact for the business that wants to make an impact and what our business is looking for in sharing that perspective with the nonprofit organizations. I'm sure that's very helpful.
Yeah, I think it helps to not get too far away from the work, to make sure that we're still connected to the community that we're wanting to influence. And that, even leads into best practices for companies when they're thinking about this work. It's how close are you to the problem that you're trying to solve? And if you're not super close, it's fine, but let's figure out ways to get information to you so that you can make wise decisions when it will come back and influence the community.
Sure. So to that point, before we get too deep into the hows and the whats, let's talk a little bit about social impact overall. When we talk about that word, we hear that word a lot now. Josh, help us really understand what we mean when we actually talk about social impact.
Sure. Ask 10 people what social impact means and you'll get 10 different answers. And not in a bad way, but it's rapidly evolving. When we launched Selflessly in its infancy with the city of Indianapolis in 2017, social impact was significantly different then than it is today. I don't think that there's necessarily a dictionary level of what social impact is, but from our perspective, it's a mix of community engagement, tracking your ethics, the way that your company is responsible to being a good citizen to the planet through sustainable development goals. It's really a mix of what the role a for-profit company has in the space to be able to be a positive contributor across the board.
And Jacqueline, we know that a lot of companies have started to step into this space more intentionally. And I think that we've already seen some missteps from some fairly large names out there, and even some smaller companies as well, who think that they're doing the right thing, or they want to do the right thing. They want to take some sort of action and begin to be involved in the social impact space. but they may not necessarily know how or if they're even ready to go down that path. What would be some things that you would suggest that people in organizations think about, in businesses, if they're trying to determine what their right next step is?
So you're right, there's been mistakes in this field, and I think that's important to recognize. And I also think if we can keep a learning mindset as in this field, we will do better, because I think some companies don't go into it out of maybe fear of what the messaging might be in the community. And, that's one approach. And I would say, well, I hope we don't take that approach, but let's maybe pilot and learn along the way, so that as you're developing your strategy, it can be like building blocks. You can build on one another. So you don't have to launch everything at once. We're talking a lot today about holistic practices. And when they are holistic, when you do have a holistic approach to social impact and community engagement, you have everything from the policies in place to leadership support to employee volunteer opportunities to granting and giving money to the community. I mean, that's a really holistic view of social impact from a company standpoint. But it doesn't mean you have to start with all four immediately on day one. And instead, I think the readiness that you're talking about, what would demonstrate, are you ready to do this? Well, one factor is absolutely leadership. And I think what we see right now is that many employees are actually ready before the CEO is ready to take this leap. And that's where we're coming into this disconnect, where people are leaving the company, they're leaving the field, because they don't get the sense that leadership is bought into a holistic social impact strategy, or making it both a good place for an employee to be, but also a good place to create change in the community. And so a lot of employees, especially in the younger generation, they know they want this to be part of the company. But we also need to see that this is going to be most successful if the employee base is bought in and the leadership team is bought in. So one is, the reality is the leadership team needs to be bought in for this to work. And then the other is resources. So I think you're ready to go down this path when you're willing to put resource towards it. And it doesn't just mean financial resources. If you are not able as a company to allocate a large amount of financial resources to it, another way of looking at it is human capital, which is at the end of the day money. But that's why I say resource, because you can put together a team of people who can take lead on this in your company, but you are demonstrating by allowing them to take the time to work on what your social impact strategy is. You are demonstrating that this is so important to the company that you're going to allocate your most important resource, which is your people, to think and to act on the strategy.
So I want to take just a moment to pause there and encourage everyone who's joined us today. If you are interested in asking a question, or if you have some experiences that you'd like to share that you think the group could benefit from, we definitely want to encourage that. So please do give us a wave, or put something in the chat, and we can have that as part of our conversation. So Jacqueline, you bring up a great point, and Josh, I'd love for you to spend a little bit of time elaborating on the idea of the intersection of employee engagement and social impact. How do these two things really work together to create that culture that we're looking for? That's something we're hearing a lot of people talk about. The Great Resignation is being driven by employees not finding fulfillment in the culture and in the environment that they're working in, and so they're looking for that change. And we think, as a part of this conversation we've already started, that a good part of that is related to this idea of employee engagement that has more purpose and meaning in the society as a whole, not just in the work that they do, which leads us to the idea of social impact. So talk a little bit about those two things and how they're related, and maybe what you've seen with some of your clients.
Yeah, I'm in tech, and so for years, how do you create this rock star culture? Because that's the kind of competitive advantage sometimes a tech company has over another one. So for years, you always put a kegerator in your super cool office, and everyone gets a T-shirt and a branded stress ball. And while there's space for that. Certainly we've gotten those for employees in the past. We see now employees asking for volunteer time off, or they have an external issue that's affecting them personally and they want to be able to give back, especially with like the pandemic and issues like Ukraine. Employees, humans, it's hard for people to sit back with everything going on, and they want to be able to have the space to operationalize whatever they can give if they're affected by these issues. And so we know that there's a big desire from employees to have more purpose in the workplace, or be empowered to be able to fulfill the philanthropic or altruistic side of their life. And we also know that employee engagement, keeping people connected, a lot of companies are now accepting that their employees aren't going to come back to work. So some of the in-person activities or things that were in the office aren't as accessible or needed like this. And so the combination of the need for employee engagement, the need for more purpose in the workplace, and the need, quite frankly, from nonprofits needing the corporate sector to be able to partner. Our role is to help with the employee engagement side by weaving philanthropy into that. So whether that's through volunteering, in-person engagements, virtual volunteering, or creating campaigns centered around a cause an employee cares about, or giving back as a response to Pride Month, to Ukraine, to Black History Month. And getting people to participate in fixing some of these issues is a great opportunity, not only to employ or to engage the employees, but also be a kind company. For years, CEOs have always posted, on LinkedIn, the manifesto about how Black Lives Matter, or that we need to do better at this social issue or this legislation. And so by adding the philanthropic element, really tells the story of, we believe in this, but we also want to be active in the change. And so why not use a business goal or an internal goal of engaging the employees and getting them back together or reconnected, and doing that over working on a specific cause or helping with an issue that might be prevalent in the community. So there's always the customer, will pay for your Netflix account for the year, or let's do the bike, the pickle peddler or something together as a group. There's always room for that. But I think that we see increases in participation and more inclusion when we add philanthropy and we work on a cause that lasts outside of the couple hours we're together.
Jacqueline, how would you counsel one of your business clients to find the right cause? Is that something that if a company hasn't been involved in a cause, in not only celebrating, but investing in that cause, and they've decided we need to do this, how do they make an authentic choice as opposed to just starting something that maybe doesn't have any lasting value or maybe is a disconnect? What would be the best way to start that process?
I think it starts with listening. So thinking through, who are the most important people groups that make your company tick. And one is employees, one is you have stakeholders of some sort, usually, like whether it's clients or people you serve or shareholders, and then you have the community that you live in or operate in, do business in. So when leadership listens to what their community cares about, they can tailor their decisions based on that. So the most obvious way is through surveys. And with your employees, that's easy to do a survey internally. When it comes to external groups, I think there's maybe a survey will work, but also it's okay to have that conversation in your typical meetings and to ask their opinion of your company and how you engage, where you give. Do they even know what you give to? Do they know where your employees volunteer? If you're currently doing those things. Where I see an issue is, and I think again, everything is a spectrum and a scale. So on the scale of engagement, let's say you have an opportunity to think about your first gift, where your first activity in social impact is going to be, whether it's funding or volunteer. I think one, if you're getting started, yay, good job. Then let's think about the biggest impact and where to align values. And if you take your company's mission and purpose into account, you're going to volunteer or give in categories that align to that. So for example, if you are a construction company, yes, you could give to cancer research. However, and that is impactful, it is important. But I think what I see happen often is the CEO or the leader in charge is really passionate about cancer research. So the whole company then donates to cancer research. Nothing wrong with that. But maybe the CEO, what might be better on the scale is if the CEO donates with their own private money and they think as a construction company, what if we did something in affordable housing? What if we did something to train a diverse workforce to learn the skills that are necessary by partnering with a local school district and providing well-paid internship and job opportunities? What if we host learning sites for people who are trying to enter the field but don't have access to the same resources? I think there's ways to tie the mission of the construction company with the needs of the community, and then do your volunteer and your funding in those spaces. There's nothing wrong with giving or granting money, period, to the community. It's just, where are you on the scale, and how can you assess your company's mission, your employee goals and desires, as well as what the community needs. And the magic happens when you can align those.
It also positions the company to work within its strengths, because if you're already in an industry serving certain types of customers and you just extend your giving and your advocacy and your volunteerism around that same set of stakeholders, just maybe slightly in a different way that isn't self-serving, it actually does serve you in the sense that you just create a stronger bond, but you're also, again, working within your strengths to provide a service or support that's in line with what you do.
And some of this sounds obvious, and I think it can be obvious. When it comes to actual practice, though, what I see is that for many businesses who are so good at being strategic, when it comes to community and social impact, it gets into this emotional zone, which I'm not saying avoid your emotions. I'm saying that both can be involved, and that it does not only live in the emotional zone, that there can be strategy involved that both benefit your company and can make a difference. And I think sometimes this is where an external third party can be helpful, or a team of people within a company to examine practices so that it is a different point of view from just one senior leader. That's a typical mistake that I see happen, is when everything drives up to that one person's opinion or cause. And instead, when we are more participatory, we often see better impact because of that.
That's a great point. Josh, do you have any examples of any maybe current clients or others that you've seen out in the world who are really doing a good job of looking at this authentically and playing to their strengths and doing it from that kind of ground up perspective with the employees in mind?
Sure. Yeah. I think locally, one company that we work with and that keeps us on our toes is Glick. I think if you're located in Indianapolis or Central Indiana, you most likely have seen the Glick name on buildings. They're a rental housing company, apartment management. And so they have a separate foundation where they manage a lot of the philanthropy through. And I think they are constantly trying to figure out what their role is in issues, and then how do they operationalize to be able to give back. Not every company has the benefit of being able to have a separate foundation with staff. But inevitably, no matter, we work with companies that are as small as 20 employees up to, in the thousands. And inevitably, even if you don't have a foundation, there are always people within the company that are willing to be the liaison for these issues. We find this when we implement our software, that people are already connected to causes out there and want to be a beacon to maybe get opportunities connected or start introducing those into the system. In Glick's case, and what they try to do is, one, they always like to make sure that every employee knows about what the foundation does, to be transparent about it, but also what can the foundation be used for in a philanthropic sense as an employee. So they offer things like employee assistance programs, obviously volunteer time off, matching donations. Some of the cool stuff that they do is centered around an external issue. So for instance, Ukraine, they were matching donations made to relief programs for Ukraine people, and they were triple matching whatever the employees donate, which is incredible. They already have a very a decent matching program, but doing things around Giving Tuesday, they do a 3-to-1 match as well. Things like volunteer grants, where they actually provide money back to the employee to go donate on behalf of the foundation to wherever they would like to donate, I think is really exciting. We see this from a lot of our customers, where they're now starting to, for years, it's been, you sign up for a United Way corporate giving program. They do a great job of giving you this package and managing it and giving you the data back. But employee engagement, participation in just those strict giving campaigns has gone down quite a bit. So employees have causes that they care about personally. And that's where we see this kind of bifurcation. What companies come to us for is that we have thousands of employees across the nation. How are we ever going to collaborate on something we all can do? Or how are we even going to honor our employee that's connected on a board of this dog rescue in Oklahoma, or this youth program in Minnesota? And so employees' expectation is that they should be able to go out and work with the causes that they care about. And so that's generally where the transition comes to, where companies come to us, say we want employees to be able to go do what they do and we'll support them, versus shutting down the business for the day to go do a day of service that may not necessarily encompass what all the employees care about. And so, and I think that's really exciting. Philanthropy is changing from one major gift to one cause to frequent smaller gifts across many causes. And so being able to, as an employer, be able to provide more resources to the employee to give back how they want to is really the direction that the community engagement side needs to be participating in. And so I think that's just exciting because we see a lot of local grassroots organizations now getting funding from big corporate partners where they used to just be partnering with the large nonprofits. And so kind of gives more resources for all, and then we see participation rates go up astronomically from the employee side. So it's kind of a win-win all the way around.
So one thing that you mentioned got me thinking too about just reminding all of ourselves that when we talk about employee engagement, and if we're looking at using a tool like social impact to help drive engagement, engagement doesn't just mean pulling employees together to be bonded to each other. It actually is very much also about doing the things that help the employee on an individual basis feel connected to the company. And that can be done, you know, your example of maybe there's a lone employee working in Oklahoma and they want to participate in their passion is around animals, and that's the cause that they want to be involved in. That doesn't really have anything to do with their coworkers, but I could see that when that's acknowledged and supported by the employer in some way, whether that be a matching gift or an opportunity to take time off or featuring that employee's story in a company newsletter, whatever it might be, that gives that employee a sense of belonging and connection that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with their other coworkers and activities that they may or may not do together. Just an interesting thing that I'm picking up on.
Mm-hmm.
We do have a question from one of our audience members, and so I wanted to just share that with both of you, and either one of you, please feel free to jump in on this. But Gabrielle is asking about how a small business can get started in volunteering, and I think in particular, this is a bit of a challenge to figure out, especially when you're a very small business. You only have a few employees, and you want to try to do something to make a difference. Any thoughts there from either of you?
Happy to share some ideas, and I'd love to hear what Josh has to say too. And I'm also sure that people who are on this call have ideas. So I'd love if you want to put them in the chat and share those as well, because people here are experts on this topic as well. So to get started in volunteering, I think goes back to, well, what's the purpose? Why is your business doing this to begin with? I hope that part of the answer is to impact the community. So there's one reason. Another would be to provide team building opportunities for your staff. And then another might be to further your company's mission out in the community. And so I think volunteering is also an opportunity to give voice to your employees. And Josh was speaking a lot about this. And so it's an opportunity to hear from them and to respond. So I think that typically if an HR team can help do the planning and the logistics side of it, but give voice to the rest of the employees so that they're not burdened by the logistics. And it's not like, oh, this is one more thing I have to do. But they get to say, okay, of these three options, which are you most excited about? Let them vote, let them participate with their opinions. And then your team, HR team, can plan it and then execute it. And it could look as simple as, in terms of getting started, for the first year, do a half day and have it be all together, and then take a look at, okay, does it make sense to do 2 a year? Does it make sense that they have options to participate this day or that day, or not at all? Does it make sense that we have a committee on the staff that helps plan it? Would that bring life to people, or would that burden your staff? And I think that's where, knowing the specific business, it's really helpful to know, well, what are your overall goals with this? And what is how interested is your staff in being engaging? Do they just want to give an opinion, or do they really want to help execute it? Does that bring them life? Does that bring them joy to be able to connect back to the community in that way? Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Depending on your employee size, the cool thing is a lot of nonprofits now are creating programming for corporate opportunities. So if you go onto a nonprofit's website, sometimes they have a link to, reach out to us about group programming or something where they have a package where a company can participate. So agreed on the logistics of setting these up can sometimes get really tedious. So it's helpful when the nonprofit has some of that already figured out. As well on a partnership side. We find that on the small business side, serving the employees about what nonprofits they may be interested in also could maybe link you to that cause, so you're not having to search online for it. Can help speed up the process, also increase participation. But I think we're all feeling the pressure as business owners to be responding to things going on in the world. And employees are looking at their employer to respond to these things. So if you're not responding, you're actually making a choice. That is, you're kind of making your statement by not saying anything, so to speak. So that's where we see a little bit of the anxiety around planning things. Is something happens like the pandemic or Pride Month, even as we're in right now, and so employees are like, "What are we going to do for this?" And so then the overworked HR person's like, "On top of everything else I'm doing, we'll figure it out, right?" So it really is. It can be as simple as finding a nonprofit that has a corporate offering and working with them on the logistics. Or you can dive into something that it starts out, as something that was collaborative, and we're going to go volunteer here because Zach on our team volunteers with them, and so we want to respect that. That's usually the easiest way. Sometimes let the employee kind of be the liaison. But to your point, Jacqueline, I think too, looking back at your company's mission. What types of things can we be involved in? What type of resources do we have as a company that could be wildly beneficial? Like construction and housing is where I would start building my short list of opportunities, and then getting that pared down and seeing which nonprofit is best prepared for your team to participate. The worst thing is when you show up at a nonprofit and they're just trying to get their mission done, but they may not necessarily have the experience set up to where it runs smoothly for the employees, and that can be a frustrating or challenging time. So making sure that the nonprofit can handle all of the positive energy your company is providing is something important. But there's no secret sauce, but it's not as hard as you may think, as long as there's give some time to plan.
That's such a good point, though, around nonprofit readiness for volunteers, because just because the cause is great and that nonprofit might be doing amazing work in the community does not mean that they are equipped to take 20 to 100 volunteers. One organization I know they created employee engagement teams across the organization. And so these engagement teams were around 10 people. And so those 10 people would select a nonprofit and volunteer activity. And the reason I bring that up now is based on what you're saying, Josh, depending on how large your organizations are, 100 volunteers in one session, it's often hard to find something meaningful for 100 volunteers at a time. So if you can, another tip might be to break out your volunteers into smaller groups, which logistically is more to plan, but there's where the employee engagement teams come in. It's more, there's a leader on each team to be able to plan that. So that's a great look for, Josh, when companies are picking on nonprofits or where their volunteer activity is going to be.
Yeah, side note, I learned that the hard way. So it's not I've made the mistakes. So also give yourself some grace if it doesn't go off according to plan for your first one too. So
another way to think about that too is from an emerging leader perspective. Sometimes I know in our history at Shoff, we have always looked for opportunities to have some of our emerging leaders take on responsibilities that they are passionate about, perhaps serving on a board or providing some other more specific assistance to an organization based on their area of expertise. So it's not, serving kind of in the field per se, going for a day of service at an organization with a group of volunteers. It might be taking on a bit more of a leadership role and helping with a fundraiser or serving on a committee or even serving on a board in a leadership role. And not only does that help the organization in a very different way, in a very meaningful way, but it also creates some connections and some bonds that then play out in a lot of other ways, including personal and company giving, other employees coming into the mix to volunteer, greater awareness of that cause, and on and on and on. So that may be another way that we want to think about broadening our definition of service. Well, thank you guys so much for this conversation. This has been really great. I want to just encourage one more time, if anyone has any questions, observations, things that they want to share with the group, we'd love to do that. So please let us know, put a question in the chat, or just give us a wave and we can certainly call on you there. As we start to wrap up though, I also wanted to share a little bit of a story. So as we wrap up today, I want to definitely thank Josh and Jacqueline for joining us. And I'm going to actually be sending the two of you a very special gift. And I'm going to share the story behind that gift. One of the ways that we at Shoff are working to make a difference and an impact in our community is by supporting other women-owned businesses and other creatives. And we love to tell stories wherever we can as well. So we're always looking for people who are making a difference themselves, and we want to help tell their stories. I met a young woman named Gabrielle Steele earlier this year, and I wanted to take a moment to introduce her and to just share with everyone that I'll be sending to our two speakers a handcrafted gift that Gabrielle created for them. So Gabrielle is an amazing woman who has worked very hard to form her business. It's called Glam by Gabrielle. She has a presence at the She Experience, which is here in Indianapolis. It's a community for Black-owned businesses, particularly small businesses, and particularly a lot of creative businesses. And we hope that you'll enjoy this special gift that we're going to send you. Gabrielle made it herself, and I think that it's beautiful. And for any of you who are interested in learning more about Gabrielle and what she does in her business, you can check her out on Instagram at Glam by Gabrielle S. So please take a moment to do that. Appreciate all that the two of you have brought to the conversation today. I don't see any other questions or observations. But we would love to continue the conversation. So we will actually be posting a summary blog about the key takeaways from today and a replay on the Shoff blog. So if you want to check that out, you can find it in our social channels as well as on our website, probably in the next week or so. We would love to have any comments or connections that you want to make there. And we will also make sure that we share Gabrielle's information so that you can check her out and check out the She Experience, where there are a lot of other great small Black-owned businesses that are working very hard to showcase their talents here in the Indianapolis area. Thank you. We appreciate everyone. And Josh and Jacqueline, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. What a fabulous host, and thanks for leading by example. It was great to see you, Josh.
You as well. Enjoy your week.
All right. Thanks, everyone.